What's good, combat sports fans? Welcome back to another episode of Combat and Kick It. It's your host, Bando. Today we're doing something a little bit different than any other episode we've done before. Now, you guys know I typically do breakdowns of the full cards and stuff like that. Instead, for 2025, I was thinking for every pay-per-view main event, I should get an in-depth look and analyze these fighters in the main event just a little bit more, but I'm going to do it individually. Each episode is going to be individual fighters. So today we are analyzing the champion Islam Makhachev and what he needs to do to win this fight against Arman Tsarukyan. So let's get right into it. So like I said, taking an in-depth look to Islam Makhachev, his career, his strengths, his weaknesses, and what he needs to win against Arman Tsarukyan. Now, Islam Makhachev is a fighter who is 26-1. 26 wins. Really think about it. 26 wins in MMA, that's pretty damn solid with only one loss. One loss coming to Adriano Martins. I don't even remember what year it is. I want to say 15, 16. Got caught with that hook. It happens. It happens. But this was at the early stage of Islam's career. You know, I dogged him for it before, so I'm not going to act like I didn't. I dogged the fuck out of him for it before, so I'm not going to fake or front about it. But yeah, he got KO'd at the early stage of his career, so that's the only loss on his record. Has not seen a loss since, and has only come close to a loss pretty much one time, and that was against Alexander Volkanovski. That was honestly the closest that Islam has been tested to a loss. Now, when you take the in-depth look at his skill set, what he's good at, obviously the wrestling, the Sambo background, it's massive for him. Khabib, Umar, all the guys that have been training together basically as a family and then going over to AKA and training together. You know, these guys all have similar styles, and obviously we know are high-level grapplers. The thing about Islam, though, he is a little bit different when it comes to his setups and his entries than Khabib was. Now, he does also use the black line as an indicator to shoot, but not as much as Khabib did. Now, Khabib would throw a wild flurry, which Islam does in some ways, but Khabib would throw a wild flurry that wasn't even close. Like, not even remotely close. If you look at the early parts of his career, he was just throwing shit up. Just flying and tossing stuff to get guys on the back foot. The indicator with the black line, if you look at the octagon, the black line is enough space for them to shoot at you and end up getting you up against the cage in a position that is uncomfortable. A good example is the way that Islam did it to Dustin in the first round. He interrupted the rhythm of Dustin, caught him with a couple counter shots, and then came in with a sloppy looking flurry. They tend to do it. It's typically a sloppy looking flurry, but the guys that are strikers are not thinking try to step and counter. Surprisingly, they're thinking I gotta back up so he doesn't get close enough to take me down. In the end, no matter what, if you're backing up ever so slightly, even if you're moving a little bit to the side, you're backing up in a way that's going to benefit them for the takedown. So he shoots on Dustin, goes for the double leg on Dustin. The double leg wasn't even meant to be a double leg. It was just meant to be a distraction for him to take the single leg, end up taking him up in the air, tripping him, holding him down. That was when Islam almost got that Kimura lock. So we know his grappling skill set is there. That's clear as day. But he also showed in that fight, in the last few fights, that his striking has come leaps and bounds. Now, I can't act like I didn't dog this guy on the way up. I didn't think he deserved the title shot against Charles at the time. I really didn't. I mean, nothing impressed me at that time. But now the way he's he's beating guys now, right? And then he's getting tested. The one thing that I never saw from Khabib, which is a fantastic thing for his career, but for me, I always want to see it with a lot of fighters, is we didn't really get to see that dog tested in Khabib. Nobody really brought that dog out in Khabib where he had to get scrappy. Now, that's to his benefit because he did that from his defense and everything like that, and his skill set. You know, he was able to get in and out of those fights unscathed because he was so good, and I respect that. But now we see a guy like Islam. He's tested in there. He's battle tested now, right? He's been in there with Dustin Poirier in a nasty scrap. He actually got, you know, a fight of the night. Nobody really would have expected Islam to be getting fight of the night, performance of the night, finish of the night, but fight of the night, a little bit different. Him and Dustin went to war. He knew that he was going up against a guy who you have no other choice but to go to war with. So he knew that that's what was happening. He went to war with him, ended up getting the win, made a few mistakes, which I'll break those down shortly, but he did exactly everything he could do to end up getting the win. Right, and he showed the dog in him. He showed that his striking was there. The other thing besides Islam's wrestling is if you look at the striking, you take a closer look to the striking, his kicks have become very, very, very good, and his counter punching is good as well. Those are two of his strengths on the feet, right? A lot of guys are usually pressure fighters. He's not much of a pressure fighter until he wants to initiate the takedown, right? He can counter you. He has good counters because you're not thinking that he is going to counter you. You think he's going to counter you with a takedown, and he counters you with a strike. So he has good counters. You can, you know, if you look at the counter against Charles, the check right hand, that was a great counter over the top. You know, he's hit Dustin with a bunch of counters to interrupt the rhythm. He caught Volkanovski with a couple counters that even wobbled Volkanovski. You know, and then obviously the kick. You look at the kick, he has good setups with his kicks. You watch, he starts low, ends up going high, but it's not an obvious thing. None of it's ever obvious with Islam. He doesn't telegraph his kicks, is basically what I'm saying. He throws leg kicks, not a ton of them. Some will be nonchalant. He'll throw body kicks. His body kicks, he throws with intention a lot of the times, right? He throws the body kicks, and obviously he's throwing them to do damage, but it's also throwing them to set up as well. If he can get you to drop your hands at a body kick that he's throwing multiple times through the first or second round, he's going to end up finding the home for the head kick, just like he did against Volkanovski. So his kicks are a good part of his game, a real positive in his game, and big benefit to his striking, because I don't think Khabib had kicks like that, in my opinion. Khabib wasn't much of a kicker. Khabib was good on the feet, threw some good strikes here and there, but honestly, he wasn't where Islam is. I think Islam is a much more well-rounded fighter, like just much more well-rounded. And I know a lot of people might disagree with that, but I think you look at the skill sets, it's like, yeah, Islam is a better striker. It's as simple as that. And if you're talking about him being a better striker and just as strong and just as skilled on the ground, now the difference is when Dustin was fighting Khabib went in there and submitted Dustin pretty easy, right? He had Dustin on the back foot the whole time. Now that benefited Dustin. That loss benefited because he learned from that loss and he took that into the Islam fight. I think that's why Islam didn't get the finish in that fight early, like he almost did with the Kimura, but he made a few mistakes throughout the fight that didn't allow him to get it as early as people expected him to get it. Some people thought he was going to get it in the first round. It definitely looked like it. But either way, opinion, Islam is much more well-rounded. But just like any fighter, okay, even Khabib did, 99% of fighters, and there's a very, very small 1%. It's a tiny ass 1%. But 99% of fighters have holes in their game. And holes can be exploited if you can see it. Now, as a guy who breaks down fights, trying to be not technically an analyst, I kind of just want to be a popular podcaster who talks about fights, but, you know, I do analyze these fights a little bit, and when you break these fights down, you realize if I can see openings, then the opponent and the coaches are definitely going to see the openings, right? Now, just because I see the openings on a TV screen does not mean that I would be able to exploit that. Doesn't mean I would be able to beat these guys or anything like that. So don't get to running with that. I'm just saying if I can see it too, then of course they're going to see it, right? And it does not matter how good you are. There are holes in everybody's game. So one of the main holes in Islam's game is he can get drawn off the game plan. And we've seen that twice now. He can get drawn off the game plan. He is a dangerous ass dude in the first 2 rounds. Dangerous. But after those first 2 rounds, and Khabib has done it too. If you draw back to Khabib against McGregor, dominated 1-2, kind of took the third off, right? Abandoned the game plan in the third. Realized he shouldn't do that. Went back and got the finish in the fourth. Exact same thing that Islam did in this fight against Dustin. He abandoned the game plan for a moment in round 3, was making mistakes and was trying to trade with Dustin, and he was still winning exchanges, but Dustin was landing some good shots. And anytime a guy like Dustin lands good shots, you don't want to stand in there and stay in there and keep getting hit. Now, for some reason, Islam looked like he was 50 pounds bigger than Dustin, but that's a whole other episode. So, in a funny way, one of the negatives in his game also is a positive. It's one of the positives I mentioned. And it's that blitz. That sloppy blitz coming in. And when he comes in with that sloppy blitz, if someone just planted and threw, right? Or shot for a takedown, which is something that Arman Tsarukyan very well could do. He comes in with that blitz. I can see it one day being his demise, right? Just because the wrestling is a threat doesn't mean you can't get countered. If a guy just plants and is willing to set in that moment and catch you just at the right time, just like any fight, obviously, that's how any knockout happens, right? They're able to counter, catch you just at the right time, right? So it's not impossible, but the way he comes in very sloppy on that. And I think with guys like Dustin, guys like Volk, guys like Charles, who obviously Charles was the biggest threat on the ground. Volk, we wanted to see if Volk was going to get tested. Volk got tested on the ground. We saw that Volk is a strong fighter on the ground, but he's not an amazing wrestler or anything like that. But when you look at these guys that he's fought, right, they go in with a striking mindset, right? They're looking to strike with him. And when they do that, like I said, they become flat-footed, they back up, they try to get out the way, and it benefits Islam because he ends up being able to shoot. Arman Tsarukyan is not that guy. He is not going to be able to do that to Arman Tsarukyan. Now, I'm not saying he's going to lose to Arman Tsarukyan, but this is a much more dangerous fight that you don't want to leave openings like that, because you're talking now about a guy who is not threatened when it comes to the ground game. We've seen this fight once before. They had fantastic exchanges on the feet. They were both early, right? They had good exchanges on the feet. Arman is a much more aggressive striker than Islam is. Islam's a much, I would say, smoother counter striker, but both are powerful, right? They got good pop in their hands. So Islam can't really go in there too sloppy, because he can end up on his back or he can end up getting caught. And against a guy like Arman, who is not going to be threatened, and I think Arman realizes that if he's just pushing the pace instead of off his back foot, Islam's not going to be able to do a lot of the things that he's great at. And legitimately, think about the way that Arman fights. Who is going to be backing up? Is it going to be Arman or is it going to be Islam? You don't see Arman Tsarukyan back up in his fights. He's pushing the pace. I mean, he was pushing the pace against Charles. He was up in Charles' face. Charles is the pace guy. Charles pushes the pace, all right? He wasn't in that fight. And then the athleticism of Arman Tsarukyan, It's all dangerous. So it definitely ends up being a negative in Islam Makhachev's game. That certain flurry that he does and getting slightly sloppy. He has to be technically sound in this fight, and if he's smart, he gets an early finish. That's the best possible outcome, is he has to get an early finish. I don't think you want to play too long, right? You don't want to end up getting in exchanges and stuff like that. I feel like a guy like Arman could end up landing something very dangerous. But if this fight did go 5, we do know that Islam is battle tested. He's battle tested through many rounds now. And Arman, we know Arman can go 5. He's got the cardio to go 5, no problem. But is he battle tested? We're going to have to find out. And I think Saturday night we are about to get an extremely technical matchup and a fun matchup to watch. It's going to remind you of a, just in a different style, but in terms of excitement and skill-wise and watching the way it goes back and forth, is going to be similar to Davis and Figueiredo to Petr Yan. Like, that fight was back and forth in certain ways, but then Petr Yan started just opening up. I have a feeling the fight's going to be like that. Exciting, very technical, but one guy is going to end up just taking over and leading the dance. Either getting a finish or getting the decision win. But either way, I feel as if this is a much more dangerous fight than anything that Islam has had in his most recent fights. Like, coming off of 2 fights against Volkanovski, against a guy who's a 145er. Not only that, beat him one time in a very close decision, and then beat him on short notice in the second fight, and then you proceed to end up fighting Dustin Poirier, who is a known striker, who is not known to get wins on the ground besides that win against Michael Chandler and a few others early in his career. So, danger-wise, this is the most dangerous fight he has been in. And Arman Tsarukyan is a problem. So, Islam's got to be smart. The keys to victory in this one, don't abandon the game plan. It's just as simple as that. That is the only key to victory, in my opinion. Do not abandon the game plan. Go in there and do exactly what you do best. If you get Arman down, do not get into exchanges that you don't need to get into. He's going to scramble. He's going to be explosive. Get him down, hold him down, and get the finish. That is the best bet for Islam Makhachev, because I feel like the longer this fight goes, it's not that Arman is better in 5. I just think the longer this fight goes, the more opportunities Arman has, and Arman, in my opinion, is a much more powerful striker. If he lands, it could be night-night. So we'll see what happens on fight night for UFC 311, and I still got to break down Arman, so we'll have that. Hopefully that episode's a little bit better than this one. Trying to get used to it. I got notes here and stuff, so reading the notes and coming back, it's just the beginning of this one. But this is definitely going to be a new segment that I'm doing throughout the show, where I come through just breaking down each individual fighter, because you got to take an in-depth look on the guys as well. I take an in-depth look at the fight, and we do a quick little breakdown, but I got to get more in-depth on each fighter. So this one was for Islam Makhachev, the champion. Do I believe he is going to come out as champion? Find out when I break down UFC 311. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell notification button if you enjoyed this episode. If you didn't, I don't know why you didn't. Comment why you didn't. If you did, comment why you did. Either way, you just like, comment, subscribe. Don't be a bitch. I appreciate it. I'll catch you on the next episode. Peace.